And I think we're
Going.
live right now.
Oh shit, we
So,
are. Hello, everyone. Hello. I am
hello.
obviously not dressed for the occasion, but so be it. It's the winter time.
Oh my god. I hope that doesn't clip my monetization of It's all right. It's all right. I always appeal and I always get. So, yes, how have you been this week, Prude? You had a video right before this.
Yeah, I just had a video come
Yeah.
out, and then there's gonna be two new things for patrons on Subscribestar. There's gonna be an article reading and review from Stephen M. Walt about World Order and how to build it in Great Power Rivalry. And then I'll be starting a reading series to keep my audience and my patrons prepared, because Dimes and I from Blood Satellite are going to be doing a stream sometime down the line about Murray Friedman's book, What Went Wrong, The Creation and Collapse of the Black Jewish Alliance. And we thought, well, that's kind of relevant today.
Nice, nice.
Why not have a book to go over it? So that'll be available on Subscribestar this weekend.
That was a very controversial book, by the way, if I recall. That
Oh,
was
yeah.
like one of those kayfabe revealing moments. But anyways, I'm back in my old room. I have reclaimed it from the Follow the Rules days. I moved my computer to my main computer to this room. So hopefully, I mean, everyone is asking me. They want the aesthetic back. So it's back, ladies and gentlemen. The lamp and everything, it's back. But so it's been a good weekend. Of course, yesterday I released my Kino Corner.
It was so good.
Yeah, thank you. The Patreon stuff is even great because we talk about like culture war stuff and how the right wing can like actually make decent art, but also we absolutely shredded Daily Wire Studios. Like that film they got with the girl boss. What's it called? I forget. It's like,
is this the one with Gina Carano or?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
the Western, right?
Imagine like conservative. It's like those Christian movies they pump out. Yeah, my mother, because there's a bunch of them on Tubi. So my mother watched a few of them, and one of them was like totally ridiculous. It's always like the guy and his sister, the actors, but it's like he's a homeless guy that can't feed his little sister, but then he takes over this restaurant that has a chain of restaurants because God provided for him in the Pentecostal church or whatever.
Well, speaking of like Christian movies, did you see that that one actress had decided to quit doing Hallmark films,
Yeah.
and like she's related to just like
Yeah.
the most obscure people imaginable? And I was just thinking to myself, odd how you end up in this like niche little gig as the necessary blonde woman in the Christian Hallmark movies every Christmas. And I get that they're starting to like woke them up a little bit and have same-sex couples or like the token, BIPOC character that they need. But I can't help but find that Hallmark films, especially around Christmas times, are kind of like low-key some of the most reactionary kino out there right now. Where it's just like woman who's stuck in miserable city and has a girl boss job, decides to go visit her family home for the holidays, or her job takes her out to the middle of nowhere and she finds a man and she abandons the city and she realizes she's so much more happy being the heckin' wholesome, I'm going to work on an apple farm around this Christmas time field, and that's going to be my business with my future children. And I'm thinking to myself, I see why my aunt watches these things.
I see why my mom watches them.
They're kind of reactionary.
They are. They're like, I mean, they are in a way, like, I think Hallmark movies in general kind of like prawn for women in some ways, but it's like middle age, like white women in particular. Like even like my Gen X cousins watch Hallmark. They're like, you know what? It's shameful, but I just got to get my Hallmark Christmas movie fix. So, even my internet friend is in the chat. Yes, please, ladies and gentlemen, before we go on, sneed those super chats, please. Please, it's we have a great stream planned. Really, truly, a few years ago, let me tell you something. I got ratioed pretty hard for being anti-anime, and I was totally closed-minded. I said, no way, I would never watch anime. It's destroying the right wing, and really, it's terrible. But the more that apart from like the what do they call it? The female ones, the really cutesy ones, chujos, like apart from the really cutesy, like obvious kind of like, sussy baka type of stuff that some of you weebs watch, the quality of anime I've discovered is just superior to Western cartoons in the last, I would say, at least since I was watching Teletoon when I was a kid in like 2000. So it's like, really anime, I gotta admit. I haven't watched a few of them. I'm trying to get my way. Probably next one I'm gonna watch is probably Ergo Proxy. I might watch Cowboy Bebop, but after watching a few films and a few series, I gotta say the
You
Weebs
haven't
have
seen
won my
Cowboy
heart over.
Bebop yet?
No, I gotta watch Cowboy Bebop. I know the
Okay.
basic premise, but I have to watch it. I hear
That's one
Ergo
of the few
Proxy
that
is
I've
really
seen.
good.
We can talk about that for hours.
Oh, okay, when I watch it, we'll do a stream of Cowboy Bebop because I had this whole. And by the way, if he's watching, by the way, shout out to my friend Vic, my good Serbian Orthodox friend. And by the way, I'm 100% supportive of the Serbs. So, we had a whole like 3-hour conversation once about Cowboy Bebop. He was like explaining it to me, and so I'm like, but at the time, this was a few years ago. I was like, whatever, But now I'm like, yeah, maybe I should go and watch Cowboy Bebop. Yeah. So, but anyways, this one I wanted to cover because truly, truly, to me, it's not just an anime. I would say it's an avant-garde piece of art. I would say that Serial Experiments Lain, you can't really fit it in a lot of traditional anime tropes. It's something that is, in my opinion, right up there with avant-garde cinema. It's something like just incredible. I have nothing. I can't express to you how much I've loved watching Lain. And I know we're going to address some certain things politically in terms of certain people that really like Lain too, but we'll get to that. So, but first and foremost, I guess, because I'm the host this week, and I said to Prude, and Prude's like, I'm not dressed to face. I go, Prude, you look like someone who watches anime, so it's good. It's all good, bro. Yeah.
Well, I've seen Tim Prude already throughout the chat, so I've just accepted it. It's winter time where I'm at. We've had a freeze. We might get snow this week, which I'm excited for. But yeah, no, I told everyone like, oh, strap in, folks. Prude has to watch an anime this week, and I did, and I was pleasantly surprised that this was actually really good. And for a show that came out 13 episodes in 1998, and I was surprisingly impressed by how well it kind of captured everything that kind of exists today. It was like everything from the Internet of Things or the Internet of Bodies, so with a little bit of like Nick Land, accelerationism, and then like Gnostic dualism all in one package. And I was like, yes, it's like someone ripped Meltdown and put it into anime form just a little bit. It was really good.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is why I think, because really Lain above even above most cyberpunk themed anime is the focus, the theoretical background behind it. I actually have, if you look at that bookshelf back there, I actually have the book Siberia, which a lot of the theoretical work was based off of with and listen, I know Douglas Ruskov is a lib nowadays, okay? He's a lib. Okay. But when he was dropping acid with Terrence McKenna back in the early 90s, it was a different story. It was a different time. But so that was your first impression of Lain. But maybe I think instead of like, it's too much to go episode by episode, but in terms of the arrangement, I absolutely adore how each episode does have a cohesive theme that goes into an overarching story, but also the introduction has the way you saw a lot of like early 90s computer programs and a lot of like these mock-up simulations of people in the art world and people in tech were doing at the time, where you have like the layer, like it's like instead of episode, it's like layer 1, layer 2, layer 5. Like I really love how they put attention to detail. And also, I believe Lain was one of the first animes to mocap real footage, but to animate it to make it more malleable, like those city scenes. So they were doing a lot of really innovative stuff. But let's go, to me, the first scene of that blinding, like the contrast, aesthetically, that sort of throughout the whole series, you hear the hum of The Wire, because The Wired is what it's really about. Really, it's the digital becomes a metaphysical plane, which a lot of reviewers neglect, and we'll get to Gnosticism and all that, but that blinding light at the beginning that greets Lain, that really establishes visually, the break between the real and this sort of metaphysical realm that is technological as well. It's sort of like a digital gnosis. But the fact that you walk out into the light and there's no detail in the street, it's sort of the contrast of the shadows that you'd find in the early morning when you're walking to school. Like just so many scenes. Like even the one scene where she gets the Navi from her father. I can remember back way back, I believe it was 2002 or 3, my old man giving, like, he had this old Windows ME, and I remember like him showing me in my room right here in this room. Actually, this is Geo lore, in the same angle too, just showing me, how to navigate a computer and how to have MSN Messenger. Like, I just remember those moments and how really there was something. I think it was my Matthew the Stout, my good friend, my best friend. He said something like, a man's first computer, a boy's first computer is kind of like a practice horse in the olden days, where you ride him well. You sort of realize his limitations like you would a favorite horse. And I guess that one little moment really got to me. But anyways, go ahead. First few episodes, let's go. What was your overall impression? Because you did binge it pretty much in a few nights. So.
Oh yeah, I binged it all last night. I finished the last episode this morning in between writing and getting some stuff out. So no, it's just a really great trip down. One, it felt really nostalgic because, I'll drop some lore on myself. Like, some early home videos in regards to a computer is like 5 or 6 year old me, circa like 2000, 2001, playing on a Windows 95 system. Just enjoying what was on there and what you could get away with a 3D graphics drawing card, and what games were out there as a possibility, things I really liked. So I don't know, like, I immediately felt that something was up in the way that her father's glasses had just sort of gave into the reflection of that blinding light of the computer screen. And I was just like, okay, there's something clearly off with him. Either he's already sucked into it or he's a part of something. The idea of a prank from a girl that is no longer with us, to say the least. I feel like that's something that has happened or has been the plot of horror stories ad nauseum now, a call from beyond. And it really did kind of fit into my own idea about how we view, like, they call it the wired, the Internet of Things or such.
Yeah.
And it was just like, oh, so the way I'm writing this out in an essay that'll come out in a little bit, but I consider our form of ingesting the internet, it has a duality to it. Light has like a particle wave duality. I think the internet, or in this instance, the wired, has a duality of it being an edible. Like, we ingest it, we consume content, but at the same time, it's also an astral plane of existence. Which clearly is the case in this show, right? But I mean, even now, when we talk about people that have been banned off the bird site, we always talk about them like they're dead. Like, oh, I hope he's happy wherever he is or wherever he's doing. I hope he respawns.
I hope Minoquion 4 comes back one day. Yeah.
I hope Maguman comes back to post once more. Things like that.
I think he did come back. I think Maguman
good.
Yeah.
But
guys.
We talk about that in terms of as if they've died, and we're collectively aware of people's existences. So to watch this person radically transform or develop a duality, dare I say, with Lain, just entering the internet and getting more and more sucked into it and the power that it has. Yeah, it was just felt very prescient to our current and present time.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny, I have a Terrence McKenna poster back there. And yeah, so it's oddly contemporary Lain, but here's a few ways in which it's not contemporary, like in terms of the overall aesthetics. The internet envisioned by Lain in terms of the crop, because this is the big theme. And so I'm assuming that people have already watched it, or, spoiler alert, right? Because the whole show is spoiler alert.
It's a 20-year-old plus show.
Yeah.
Spoilers are kind of included, but there's your warning.
Yeah. But it's funny because the aesthetic of it, in terms of their devices, the text messaging, their approach to the internet, which is still very much like an early 90s approach of, like, the hardware is like always progressing, that you have to like load in the hardware, the Navi, they call it the personal computers. And the one thing that I didn't make sense was like, how did Lane get all of that equipment, like cooling tanks and like just this like panopticon, this like panopticon of computer banks and equipment, like just like the
Well, it
line.
reminded me of the Matrix almost right then and there,
Yeah,
just all these large cooling tanks, and then of course
yeah,
later when we talk about like kids, that thing. Yeah, just a lot of sort of that transhumanist like blend in and
the
become one with the
aesthetic.
machine.
Yeah,
But yeah, you're right. It does feel like the early 2000s, or like there are various parts throughout the show where they're like, well, here's this chip that you need to put in and upgrade things. Where, I just think of, I mean, there are channels today that'll talk about the software and the hardware, especially like
yeah.
LGR, where it's like, oh yeah, you had to take these things apart. You had to install like a new, 3D graphics card. You couldn't do this on like zombie, like they were like trying to run, later and newer mid 2000s PC games, that old hardware. Just, yeah, everything was
Doesn't
constantly
work.
upgrading. Everything you could just easily add on. That idea that, yeah, as long as you built bigger and had tower PCs and things like that, not compared to our little laptops. The cell phone, of course, right? Not really a thing. They've got these cool looking PDA things where there was a stylus pull out on the side that you would
Yeah,
write on.
but it looked
Because
like personalized and customized. It didn't. The early 2000s, they envisioned this customization that wasn't like the monotone like social media platform. It was like the Navi itself was like becomes a 3D experience in Lane, but the crossing over of what Ray Brazier calls like the wetware and the hardware, they came up with a very innovative way of like you ingest this edible and it interacts with your brain circuitry, very similar to Cronenberg in Existence, where it's solving the problem of hardware through a wetware, through a biological apparatus. But sorry, I cut you off. Yeah.
Oh no, the only thing else that I was just going to add was just that the aesthetic is straight out of like the late 90s, early
Yeah.
2000s.
Yeah.
PDAs, I think, a Palm Pilots, just the first, is that what we would just take for granted now, tablets, touchscreens, and such. I mean, it gets tried during this time frame of
Yeah.
tech, but it doesn't become really popular until 2007, once the guys over at Apple decide to do everything. And then halfway through, right, they do this lovely blending of all the real world sort of schizo theory stuff. Like, we're going to talk about Majestic 12, and we're going to talk about MK Ultra, and we're going to talk about Roswell. And I'm just like, let's go.
Let's go. And then she sees an alien too in one of them.
Yeah.
And then but then later on she becomes that alien when she confronts or she comforts her friend Arasu. I love for some reason I found annoying was
gets clipped.
Yeah. Or when that her friends kept saying Lane, that could be a clipper. Lane, like it's just it really threw me off. But Arasu, I love you. And then of course there is this, we're getting ahead of ourselves about the sacrificial nature about how Lane becomes this Christ-like figure in a way. We'll get to that. But it seems that the beginning, there's this ambiguity. There's this, how shall I call it? Sunsetting of this person at the beginning. So trauma. Then, of course, Lane confronts this mass, in a nightclub, a Mateen type figure. He goes crazy with, doing some fun in a nightclub in Siberia. And so Siberia is the book by Douglas Ruskow about what he called the early cyberdelic movement in the 90s, where he was interviewing Terrence McKenna in this book. And he was talking about how these people, these like Silicon Valley nerds, they used to like drop psychedelics. That's still going on, by the way. They envision the internet as a psychedelic, meaning a mind expanding experience that could cross over into our collective reality. And so throughout Lane, you have this, and of course they reference John C. Lilly with his, which is really crazy. There's a documentary by Atrocity Guide. Maybe we'll interview her on the show one day. She did the documentary with the dolphins where he would like bomb out on acid and like get the woman to have relations with a dolphin, and that this was all for science, psychedelic science, though. It was all for science. To try to find what he believed was because of the gigahertz that surrounds the Earth, the audible noise wavelength in the ionosphere, if I recall, that human consciousness can be understood by this greater consciousness in nature. So in Lane, you have this illusion to the wired mimicking or hooking up with a previous source of all pervasive consciousness. And so there's this one scene where Lane meets the god of the machine, and or Lane was explaining this to Arasu, where she's like, Arasu is like, well, can we understand it? Like what we're doing? Like if we built the wired and the wired comes from something else, what is the other thing? And Lane just basically goes, do you think the average normie needs to know that? Like, the average normie worships whoever or whatever. It's cool, like they don't
got
really
all their
need to.
gods. They don't need anything.
Yeah, exactly. The only time though, and the reason I say Lane is different is that the only time we get an inkling of previous anime tropes that largely come from a lot of ancient sources within Japanese tradition, like no theater, is the god, I forget his exact name, in The Wired, that Lane, he's like a demiurge. And he has the same mask, the same kabuki mask that you find in other animes like Spirited Away, that comes from no theater and kabuki theater in Japan. So that's the only real link to, oh, by the way, I have 88 watches. So this is the only link that they have to like traditional anime. But this is very much different from a lot of anime tropes. But there still is that like savior thing, especially like the young woman in high school. But there's something markedly different about Lane. Sorry, I'm just ranting right now. I know we have our weeb friends in the chat. Internet friend, the dolphin has had a PhD. Pretty huge dick, you mean? Apparently dolphins, they rapidly coom. You can't get close to it when it's cooming because the dolphin's like a jet. It's like, this is what that Justin Wang video about, like the guy that tried to like, with a dolphin. So.
No,
anyways,
I don't know, Gio. Go on. Dig this hole further.
This is a good quote and please, I'm not going to highlight comments unless you need those super chats, okay? Please, God. But internet friend is a good friend of mine. A lot of what happened in Japan in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s has seen in hindsight as a small-scale version of things to come from the rest of us. I suspect soon enough we'll see something about it in the 10s or 2000s. Oh, that's very true. Yeah, you could see that. But anyways, go ahead, Brew. We're going abstract here. Maybe I should pull up the episode links so just to keep us on track. But go ahead.
No. So I thought about a lot of things throughout this entire episode, and I actually, hold on, my notes are over here. But
okay, there you go. Notes. There you go.
So yeah, I know I took some scribbled down shit around through here. So I thought it was a weird sort of, like, they don't mention it, but my mind immediately went to the noosphere. I was thinking about Vertaninsky and Chardin throughout this whole thing, this idea of connecting to the mind. And, this creation of a godlike being that Lane has become. And so my brain just immediately went, okay, like, oh, so like Christogenesis, sort of what Chardin was talking about in this, like, sort of new ecology that he was referring to. But so that came to mind. I thought that was an interesting concept. They don't even mention it, but it felt like that's kind of what they were going off of. I have not read the book Siberia either. I just thought that was a really interesting sort of sort of a nice play on words for like internet cafes and things for the late 90s, early 2000s. Except this time it's a nightclub. I'm not around from that time. I am soon to only be 27, so it's not like I was hipping it up in internet cafes and such. But maybe they were like that. Who knows? Maybe chat can tell us. But I thought that it was this interesting way to have a narrative about sort of a transhumanist gnosis, while at the same time recognizing the importance of your own impact on the world. Like, the important, like what good is a body, or how important is a body to you? And your impact on the terms of how people remember you, your impact on other people's lives. And of course, not to like go all the way to the end, but I kind of had thoughts about, you were never born, George Bailey, that sort of deal, and what that impact would be. And the whole idea that all of human memory, all of human consciousness, not to mention with all the, halfway through the episodes, this conspiracy stuff that gets pulled out, all of a sudden, all of human consciousness, human records, ideas, Xanadu, etc., the Library of Alexandria, all these things come to mind because it's like, well, with the internet these days, especially now, looking back 20 plus years since the show came out, we have Wikipedia, we have all our entire like living memories and existence that we choose to broadcast out here are still available on the record. Nothing really is with the internet, nothing is truly gone unless you're, Nina Jankowicz or Taylor Lorenz, and then they can get anything deleted off the Wayback Machine, but that's neither here nor there. And then the last thing, of course, is like the sort of like Gnostic duality between like God and then just like the earthly realm, and the idea that really the purpose of Gnosis is to maybe, at least in the show, right, is this way to transcend the physical and to achieve a spiritual transcendence, but it exists through this, man-made mechanism, which is the wired, which I thought was really interesting. Because typically in Japanese anime, I know that like Christianity is one really foreign to them, and in other, anime and manga, usually Christianity or the Roman Catholic Church is typically made out to be some sort of evil or bad guy. I immediately think of the Holy See and Berserk. But this time it just, there are very subtle references, like the DJ in Siberia who's been passing around chips and things like that.
Yeah.
He's got a crucifix on his necklace, but that's really the only time we talk about it. And then there's of course the reference with our lovely theater character, sort of in this new realm where he references Christ. But outside of that, like, it wasn't necessarily bashing. It was just sort of experiencing Gnostic duality, sort of this Manichaean concept, rather than, traditional gospel interpretation, which I just thought to be really interesting, because like you really could achieve a duality with the internet. I talk about it sometimes on my own channel, where I try and keep my real life very separate from the amphibious personality I put on Twitter. But in Lain, obviously that's a very different thing, where, the person in the real world becomes a shadow of the former self that has transcended into the online, and Lain very much battles that, which I thought was really good writing and really good stuff. I don't know. Did you watch it subbed or dubbed? I watched it dubbed, so perhaps my view is going to be a little different.
I watched it. I watched it
subs.
subbed on
okay.
the free anime channel. Maybe I shouldn't say it, but the free one,
there's a lot of free ones,
Yeah,
like
there's a lot. It's like
the 9 one.
There's because Crunchyroll you have to pay for it, don't you?
Well, that's never gonna happen.
That ain't never gonna happen. I'm not gonna pay for nothing.
Funimation, Crunchyroll. What the hell?
Yeah. But it is funny. I think that anime does present to you a lot of different things that Westerners unfortunately cannot experience within the animation studio systems that currently exist. I mean, what would be an intelligent one that came out recently, like a Disney one, maybe Coraline, like my friend Ellie, that's her favorite film. But no, I think Disney? Is it Disney or is it Pixar? But like Western animation.
Oh,
like, yeah. No, I watched it subbed. I think
it was produced by Leica.
Oh, there you go. The Chad sub versus the Virgin dubs. Yeah.
I don't watch anime, fellas. I'm gonna get roasted either way. So
yeah. But I watched all of Girls Last Tour subbed as well. I mean, my mother, like, she hates sub stuff because she's like, I don't want to work to read. Like, I'm like, oh my god. But it's,
I don't know, if someone gives me a French or Russian film, I'm not gonna watch it dubbed. I'll watch it. Like if someone says, hey, we're gonna go watch, Andrei Rublev, you bet I'm gonna sit my ass down and watch 4 hours of Russian to English translation subs.
Yeah.
I don't know, anime is different.
Rublev. Yeah, I'm halfway through. Maybe we should talk about it sometime, but because I watched Stalker, I watched Mirrors, and some other Tarkovsky film. But
I've seen every Tarkovsky film. We could easily do a show on that.
Yeah. Stalker is like one of my favorite films of all time. I have a book. I have a Theory Cell like film analysis book over here somewhere about Tarkovsky. But no, I think that Lain. So Siberia is about, and there's this other book I'm looking at right here because I have shelves here. There's if you could, I could do a little, like a
bookshelf stream.
Yeah, well, maybe one day. I have the red book here. I'm thinking of doing it for my patrons maybe next year. That would be a monumental, multiple part series on the red book. But no, Siberia is about this sort of neo-shamanic ideal of the internet producing what these people in the 90s were calling like the global brain, and how information technology, I'm very crossed because for many years I've researched this type of stuff when I was a new ager, right? And I think that unfortunately it does come about from this like neoliberal, like, 90s optimist mindset that really was only present in like the Western world and certain parts of Asia. If you lived in Eastern Europe and Africa, I'm sorry, you did not have this optimism in the 1990s. I'm sorry. Okay. You had, war crimes and other unspeakable terrors. But I think but I think that when it comes to all of these people like Jaron Lanner and Terrence McKenna and the Ruskov himself, like it really it came down to the creation of something that would move us beyond the confines of our biology, but also to reconcile like how consciousness really works in a way. And Lane is basically a dramatized version of how do you, like you were saying, how do you reconcile with the fact that you are an embodied experience, but you are attached to something more than that. And so Lane, there's this constant struggle in Lane to say, no, I have a body. I am Lane. I am the one Lane, right? I am real. I'm not these avatars that go and spy on people in the Wired. I'm not like these, I'm not an evanescent thing, but really, as we know, the reveal, Lane is an amalgamation of programming that inhabits a body. And I guess that could be like the Japanese sort of cargo culting of Christianity a little bit, like but the more new age version of it with like what people call Christ consciousness and very heretical stuff. Even Desjardins was kind of heretical. Let's face it. It's not in terms of Catholic tradition. A lot of people, I think Martin
man.
even talked about Desjardins being like, like totally baseless type of charlatan figure. But I do love Desjardins, but it's just I realized that.
I mean, cosmogenesis is a wild topic. But I mean, it's interesting and it's worth reading sometimes. And
just realize it's not exactly orthodoxy when it comes to
it's not. It's not really. It's not really what you would call Catholic. It's not really Catholic, nor would you call it particularly big O Orthodox and Christian tradition either. But yeah, no, it's just it's interesting. Like the idea of these things are always unique about how our internet, or in this instance, the wired right, could enable us to inform a higher form of being, and at the same time, perhaps we could implant that in a human being, trying to digitally create incarnation in individuals, thus some sort of Christogenesis, a spiritually transcendent being. But in this instance, it's really transhumanist. And at the same time, right, like we see Lane inheriting this kind of she's everywhere at all places at all times, and she developed some kind of omnipresence where she can watch people do terrible things to themselves,
like basically what is Fat Lover call it, jelking to the teacher?
She's DJing her own party to the teacher.
She's flicking the bean.
But and it's funny because like for Lane, it's all in one person, and it has this sort of it kind of also reminded me of like Deus Ex and like the Aquinas protocol, where it's all more centralized, and then we've got Daedalus that can all sort of be everywhere at once, this internet being, and trying to.
But Daedalus comes from Greek mythology, right? If I recall, like
I'm just the names from the game, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's a different parallel, because this is about embodied in a sort of transcendent, digitally spiritual creature that's everywhere at once. And then you sort of read about what we've got today, which is the Internet of Bodies from
Yeah.
Rand Corp, where it's just like Internet of Body devices can track, record, and store users' whereabouts, bodily functions, and what they see, hear, and even think. These devices vary greatly in how they are used. Some are freestanding, such as infusion pumps and sensor-equipped hospital beds. Others are wearable, like health trackers, prosthetics. Others are implanted, such as cardiac devices and ingestible digital pills. And so
Yeah.
it's just
You know,
absolutely crazy to think about.
I have to release it, but I recorded you know, my series The Wired magazine back pages, Artifacts from the Future. I found this Institute for the Future, which is a Palo Alto Rand Corporation affiliated thing. I did a stream on their map of the future when I used to do. Maybe I'll bring it back though, this laid back Saturdays. But like I explained in my Q&A video that's going to come out this Saturday for my patrons, you know, I'm going to do this bi-monthly Q&A thing, maybe once every few months. But patreon.com/Genre Productions to ask me the important questions. Someone asked me about well, a bunch of different things like photography and politics, and but I said that I don't really like doing solo streams because I like having a partner that I trust, such as yourself. So you know that because it can give me pause and I can bounce my ideas off someone, and because I notice like when some people like particular are really good at like just reading the chat, like Millennial Woes, he's very good at solo streams. Like I'm not good at solo things. Maybe that's just my opinion of myself. But anyways, let me quote you some stuff from Siberia. But yeah, it has that feeling to it of the sort of the Christogenesis thing, but also the fact that Lane fights to have a body is very interesting because usually, especially at this time in like these weird schizo like Usenet forums and all these like Silicon Valley people, like Moldbug, by the way, was also involved in this, although he took a much more materialist turn later on in Unqualified Reservations. But I'm sure Moldbug was dropping acid with Douglas Rushkoff at one point. But you know, it's the embodiment of it is like, you know, Crooner said something very fascinating to me once when we were doing our Content Minded, where he said that the whole like thing of having an avatar like Second Life, like that came back in the early 2000s. Now it's coming back with like, although I don't know, Meta is probably going to fail, but you know, that's no, like 30 people are on it for millions upon millions of dollars. They can't, but see, Facebook.
They started
Sorry,
doing layoffs at Meta.
yeah.
So, I
They
mean,
can't have any good customer service like when my Instagram account was hacked by some subcon, but they have to invest money in you know, by some Dravidian hacks my you know, my my Instagram, but you know, they can't you know, they have to invest everything in Meta. But Crooner said something interesting. He's like, in a way, it violates the original spirit of the internet because through word and text and image, the internet was to escape the confines of your body. But to just have an idealized body in Meta or in Second Life before, that came about much later. The early internet was a sort of a cerebellum on a stick. You know what I mean? It was very impermeable. It very much was who you. There's a part of your true self, but really it's not. It's not a body. It's something different. But let me dig up some quotes from Siberia over here by Douglas Rushkoff. Oh boy. So, and then of course we have to dig up some Lane quotes that are very good. Like some of the quotes in Lane are just phenomenal, by the way. Really philosophic writing that you couldn't get in a million years. But yeah, I remember Terence McKenna. There's this one part in Siberia where Terence McKenna was talking about like mind expanding consciousness and so forth. And I'm having trouble finding quotes here, but we'll find some. But anyways, go ahead, Prue. Go ahead. There's
I think you've got a point in
yeah.
regards to. I mean, it used to not be pictures as profiles or full-bodied avatars that you would commission people to paint up, or of course on VR chat, anyone can be, you know, the G-Man from Half-Life, Kermit the Frog, or whatever the hell that they want to be. I mean, that's definitely come about. I mean, Second Life and The Sims were escapisms, nowadays the escapism of the internet, I think, has really gone away, aside from a few places. And maybe the anime racists really are like the last vestige of that to some extent.
Oh, they are. They are.
But I mean, you used to be a handle, and it used to have a distinct writing style, a distinct purpose. And it's like what we were talking about last week with Kierkegaard's The Leveling. Like, there's sort of a monoculture, there's a mono language, there's a mimetic lingua franca of the internet nowadays, whether it's in memes or certain lingo that kind of is used for in-group, out-group expression. Dare I say, our own sort of, frog version of shibboleths that we can kind of use to determine insider, outsider, or, I think that apostasia, the offshoot of Pepe the Frog, is like one of the greater litmus tests of that, I think. But digital escapism is something that I think we all still kind of long for. I mean, I try and put a pretty decent barrier between my like IRL self and how I am as the Prudentialist online. But I mean, clearly here you all can see my face. I'm not appropriately dressed for this interview. I like the Tim Pool comments, by the way. That's pretty great.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a sign of the fact that like there's no real escapism. It bleeds through. In the same way that like I can sit and listen to someone say like, oh yeah, I'm reading Paul Kingsnorth or whatever. And I'm like, oh yeah, I've had like 3 or 4 people tell me that I should like send an email out to interview him and things like that. So the escapism part, because I think the internet is no longer this sort of flash novelty. Usenet is one, it's been really well preserved. And then 2, everyone has access to it, right? It wasn't a thing where you had to yell at your mother to get off the phone because you wanted to like reply to somebody on Usenet or whatever, or respond to your email. Nowadays, it's instantaneous. We're everywhere present all at once. And even now, right, like there are several Telegram chats that I'm in where it's just like, yeah, like we're talking about American problems, but he's like, I'm posting from Norway. Like, why the hell do I care? Like, we've all inherited this quasi form. It's very limited. We don't have true omnipresence, but if we wanted to, we could easily like look up war footage from what's going on from like the Tigray People's Liberation Front and just watch like live leak videos of how that's been going for the last 2 years. And so, yeah, the novelty or the escapism of it is gone because nowadays we have a monoculture, a mono language. We can all bitch about the same things. There was no algorithm back then. That's the biggest difference, right? There was no no centralized social media protocols, dare I say, of algorithms that would determine what am I going to watch next? How can I de-radicalize this person? Every time I watch a Morgoth video on YouTube, right next to it on the recommended tab is Jordan Peterson videos, which is frustrating. Or the other day, I was watching somebody's midterm. I know it was Patrick Casey's midterm autopsy was so-so. And guess what the first video was right below it? It was a Vosh video talking about how the GOP is so upset with Gen Z or whatever. And so
I knew he was going to gloat over that. Did you watch it or?
No, I didn't. I saw the title. I bitched about it on my Real Talk video. But I mean, we still very much, I think, to this day, put out a more idealized versions of ourselves. Because I mean, you and I aren't like Twitch people or the constantly online TikToker that lives in a creator house where, this is our life 24/7. Although in Based World, maybe there will be that, but who knows?
Do you imagine if there was a based version of like Creator House, but for like Twitter anons or whatever? Like, I remember saying this one time. Yeah, and people responded. This was a year ago with like the David Koresh compound, where like someone said it would have the highest murder rate in the world. Oh my God, Creator House, but for like far right podcasters. Like
everyone's trying to test out the new voice modulation.
Yeah. But no, it's funny though about the Zoomer thing is particularly annoying. The whole like Zoomer apocalypse of, they're all going to vote in the one global gigafavela world. But that's besides the point. Let's get back to Lane. I have this quote actually. I have wait, before I get to that, yes, Frenzy, Fishy Frenzy, yes. If you go to the pinned post on my Patreon channel, there is the Q&A there. So just drop a comment, or if you want to email me, a longer question, Giant Production, not Giant, what am I talking about? GiantGio at MSN.com. That's my email. Everything is in my link tree, of course. Everything's down below. And of course, everything is Prude's. Prude has also exclusive content he released this week on his Subscribestar. So, very good stuff. I have for you guys, World War Z, Giga Favela. Yeah. This I have right here, the CCRU archive. Okay. Now this is go and buy this. This didn't cost me a lot, but this is called Unscreened Matrix. This is a short passage. Once it said that there are no shadows in cyberspace. New cyberspace has its own shadow. Its dark twin, the cryptography, you could say the algorithm. Crypto-Gothic finds the deep past and the near future in catho-electronic fusion between digital data systems and iron ocean ionic sea. It unearths something older than natural mortality. Something is called unlife or artificial death. Of a death, there can be no lucid recollection, but only suggestion, seepage, hints, and is by collecting, shifting, and shuffling together these disparate clues that a pattern can emerge or include to emerge, a pattern with ultimately condensed into the looming, tangled shapes of subtle but irreparable destiny. Sorry, my old man was dropping off my cat. Come here, Gertrude. There you go. She'll sit there like a sentinel, but she won't want me to pet her until later. But anyways, forgotten crypto cultures, fossil codes, and dead systems regressively decaying into the pseudo-mechanical clicking relics of catacomb clockwork. Again, this is from the CCRU, so please, it's a tongue twister. It's deeper still among the chthonic switching, cross-hatchings, and spectral deprogrammatics, diagrammatics of unborn abstract machines that you pick up the main flat line to the crypt. The crypt is a spitting distance or departure. It is vast, nested in the cascading tick shelves. It propagates by contagion, implexing itself through intricate traces and lattices, galleries, ducts, and crawl tubes. As the extraterrestrial mega module had impacted in the chalk-out data cliffs, spitting them in scorched punctures and intensely complicated iridendum body parts. So in other words, it's about how the sort of contagion of algorithms and a lot of this poetic fancy like slam poetry, but for crypto nerds. A lot of it's just to talk about like how to find language when talking about a digital matrix and how an algorithm or how a cryptographic code permeates within a greater milieu of an online space throughout different systems. Because you have to remember, like there were still in the early 90s when the CCRU was going, they were still thinking about, is it early 90s or late 90s? Yeah, like 97 to 2003. So they were thinking about how a matrix system functions and operates. Now, how does this relate to Lain? Because Lain in The Wired cross-cuts through everything and becomes like a god within the techno parameters of The Wired, of the internet. Now, if you combine the wetware with the hardware, where people don't need devices to connect, then you have essentially the creation of a god, more or less. And then, of course, there's this part where the god of the Wired says to Lain, as long as one person believes in me, I will still exist, right? But Lain's like, no. And so Lain's like, who believes in you? He's like, you believe in me. And Lain's like, no, I reject you. And then there's this thing where she saves Arasu. Saves her. I can't stop doing that.
Just go with Alice in as she's named in the dub.
Yeah, yeah. What's the other one? The girl with the glasses, Charisu? Is that her name?
In the glass, I don't remember off the top of my head. I
mean,
really Lain, Alice, The Wired, and all the sort of weird shit with the knights. That's its own other story. We'll get to that in a minute. CCRU is an urban legend. Oh, if only. If only. Legend has it that someone from China is currently tweeting right now that can tell you otherwise, but who knows?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Is he tweeting full time now or no?
No, he's not. Um, Dimes from Blood Satellite. Oh, okay, I just looked up CCRU thinking, why does this sound like Nick Landor shit? Now it makes
It is Nick Landor shit. What are you talking about, Times? Come on, it
uh,
is. But no, so let's go through, let's get to the middle of Lane now.
the
Let
one
me look
thing
this
that
up.
kind of sticks out, and this is peak my mind just rambling here, but the part where this Cheshire cat like mouth is talking to her and is
Yeah.
impressed with her being able to exist in the wired as a fully formed human being, and he pops off and he says that most people can only appear in the wired as either eyes or ears.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I and later, of course, we see Lane surrounded by amalgamous humanoid shapes, but the only organs that are visible are eyes, ears, and sometimes mouths, which I thought to be really interesting because one, bodies without organs. Two, I think it kind of represents the three biggest ways that we participate in digital communication today. We are either readers or watchers, we are listeners, consumers, or we are speakers and we are producers ourselves. So
Mhm.
I think that kind of sticks out in my mind in the ways in which most people manifest themselves in the same way that sort of like our Gnostic interpretation of God. And here he's just like, well, yeah, like not everyone should know this knowledge. It's not accessible to everybody. It is, in sort of a like Gospel of Judas type way. Like, no,
Mm.
it's like it's the teachings that are really hard to come by. That is the narrow gate. So people that only come across it in their own belief systems are only going to see it partially. Whereas Lane really does access all of it and becomes fully formed within the wired and is part of it. But
Yeah.
I liked this formless self that sort of begins to pierce through both realms for her, and these humanoid shapes where we can see emotions and faces and things that are now lost to us because our ability to sense things are totally different. Like
Mm.
the mom and dad in the show, which we later to come are totally not what they seem to be, but this emotionally distant and not really involved mother wife character,
Yeah, that was
and
really
the
weird at the beginning. Yeah.
very, very off-putting. That's how I kind of knew something was fucky to begin with. But
Mm.
it was the dad that I thought was the more interesting of the two, just because one, he's definitely involved in it. He's in on it from the beginning. His glasses, like I said earlier, like the reflecting of the computer screen, even when it doesn't look like they're near a computer, the lighting wouldn't do that with glasses. Kind of always shows you that's where he's plugged in. That's where his mind is focused on. He's focused on his job. And at
Yeah.
the same time, like he's the one that's like kicking this all off in the beginning. He's like, "Oh, we got to get you an upgraded Navi. We got to update your computer. We got to get you at the top of the line stuff." And all of a sudden, right, that's where we are, where her hands and his hands are the ones that are updating things as part of the experiment, whereas there aren't a lot of creatures in the wired with hands.
Yeah.
There is no creator, sort of, or at least not one present, except for those fully immersed in the wired, like Lane or sort of the creator of the wired itself and the seventh protocol. So to me, it just
Yeah.
indicates that, oh, right, we're all just the machinations of these people, these creators, to know your place, sort of, which and with uh, that couples really well with the aesthetics, like with just sort of these like video games. Like it had the best dungeon crawling software on there, and I immediately think of all those like 3D maze like screensavers from like the 2000s or the late
Yeah.
90s.
The ocean one, the tubes one. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or the brick wall maze one with the smiley
Oh
faces,
yeah.
or that and just sort of the procedurally generated stuff like Daggerfall. That's the stuff that came to mind. But yeah, just a lot of really cool concepts all in at once. Sort of dualism, the sort of material spiritual divide that in this instance is pierced mechanically through the wired, which has this sort of like noospheric way which we can all connect everywhere at
Yeah.
once. We're not limited by, oh well, at certain parts of the hour, radio communications can go way further than they usually can based upon how our electromagnetic sphere works on Earth. But here it's like, nah, we've got the whole world. Everyone's connected. Everyone's minds can be combined at once, and so it's an internet of souls almost. As long as
Yeah.
someone can pierce the memory, then you exist to them. So really,
As long as we have the tweets of Minoquiam 4, Minoquiam 4 will always be with us.
exactly.
So it's
Yeah,
true.
As long as you screenshot, as long as you archive, as long as you use the thread unroll, no one's really gone.
Exactly. And even thread unrolls can be deleted. There's this one journalist, I think his name was Solomon, which I am debating whether releasing a video on this because he deleted this thread and it's actually gone from the unroll. That's how
Uh-oh.
it's about masking, where you said like it makes me comfortable and we're all together, and it's like really pathetic type of stuff. And I screen capped it. I have like the only living record of this thread that I might release one day. But I don't know if that'll get me any legal problems. But I mean, who cares? I mean, you put it out on Twitter, so let me. Yeah, you could see my cat Gertrude is on my bed. So, the one thing about Lain, we'll get to the sacrifice part of it, but let me read to you some quotes from I think is pertinent. So there's this one part, and okay, so to explain in terms of consciousness, there's a scientist. Oh, what's his name? The one in Lain that works for the corporation. What's it called? The hub. Oh man, the science. Yeah, so there's a scientist that did this experiment with children where it's called psi, or psyche, where they're trying to like basically tap into the psychic potential of children.
But
Or
remember, it's not ESP, kids.
no, it's not ESP.
They make that
It's
very
not.
clear as that distinction in the show.
Yeah, it's called is it Yasudo Irakwan? No, that's her father. Masami Iriri. Yeah, that works for the Tachibana General Laboratories, where they were trying to do this like MK Ultra program to harvest the psychic potential of children, because children are like their layer between different forms of reality is much more like porous than the adult psyche. So, and of course, like this scientist was accused of redacting them and so forth. So these are some quotes, and I really love this part. I believe it was around episode 5 where someone says I think her father said this. Yeah. When it's all said and done, the Wired is just yeah, her father's trying to like warn her that the Wired is like, don't make too much of it. When all is said and done, the Wired is just a medium of communication and the transfer of information. Why mustn't you mustn't confuse it with the real world? Do you understand what I'm warning you about? Then Lain just like turns around, like ensconced in the screen. You're wrong, huh? The border between the two, and this is what Lain says, the border between the two isn't that clear. I'll be able to enter it soon in full range, full motion. I'll transfer myself into it. Then, of course, your father says, not even the most powerful Navi can do that, Then in another instance, she says, another person, her father says, the Wired might actually be thought of as a highly advanced upper layer of the real world. In other words, physical reality is nothing but an illusion, a hologram of information that flows through the Wired. This is because the body, physical motion, the activity of the human brain is merely a physical manifestation or phenomenon, simply caused by synapses delivering electrical impulses. So it really is sort of like this Manichaean quest for identity within something, within a substrate that is much more porous than we think. And then there's people that warn Lain, like the Taro kid that likes Lain and so forth. So then Lain, of course, says, I only exist inside these people who are aware of my existence, which really is like the sort of implicit theism of it as well, that perhaps belief is something, and again, this is a heretical idea, so don't take this seriously if you're Catholic or an Orthodox, but this is certainly Simone Weil's view of it, where creation is like co-tandem with the creator, where belief in prayer is something much more than just you as a physical manifestation of a soul praying to the creator. It's more of like your belief in a way creates the reality. And this is the basis of hyperstition in, the CCRU. And it's a much older idea, even older than Simone Weil. Sorry, Simone Weil. I'm sorry. I can't, the W has confused me sometimes in French. But But yeah, it's a much older ideal than we think, where belief is something that is constituted by an active engagement with the creation of it. And so in Lane, you see this kind of like crazy schizo-gnostic ideal that belief itself constitutes the basis or the groundwork of creation, in that you believe in God, so ergo God becomes real. You know, a lot of transhumanists take this and run with it. Like, Ray Kurzweil saying, like, I don't believe in God yet. I'm going to create God. Sorry, let me do the Alex Jones. Uh, Ray Kurzweil saying he's going to create God. Like the like real like nightmarish stuff. But when you do think of it, there is, even in Christianity, you could say that not that the created one, the created thing constitutes the essence, or the of the of God, right, of Christ. But I don't know, in Orthodoxy they have the energy essences, energies thing. We can only feel the energies of the Lord. But when it comes to the Cartesian model that comes from Christianity, and then there's a super chat actually that talks about this as well, which we'll get to, where it's like the Cartesian model of the enlighten me, Prude. Which argument for God is that Fester talks about, where it's like the created thing cannot give like weight to the creator, like that has more essence than the creation? That argument? Descartes also had it where, because God has more essence than us, we cannot make claims upon something as a created being to something that is uncreated.
I know.
You know that one, right?
I know his. His is more about, an arbitrary definition of God can't be relied on, but rather an innate concept of what we have. Again, kind of building off of, well, it's given because it's not this, which has really been the first 1,000 some odd years of Christian theological thinking of what is God, which has been primarily via negativa, inferred that more or less that it's contained. Descartes would just argue that God's existence is inferred directly from the idea that all existence that's necessary to live, right, is contained in the clear and distinct idea that someone had to create it, who had to be perfect.
And
I don't know Cartesians too well.
Yeah, because Descartes would say that the hypostasized essence of God is uncreated. Therefore, the created lacks that sort of essence, not essence, but lacks the sort of essential being that an uncreated entity can account for. But in this case, though, in a lot of Gnostic thinking, and even in Simone Weil, it's that sort of Cartesianism is thrown on its head. It's to say that the creation has just as much of an essential role through belief and prayer in constituting the essence of the creator, in a way. And so by believing in Lane, then Lane becomes hypostasized as a god in the Wired, because there is no distinction between the. It's like, the sort of like you said, the body without organs, right? The Wired is very much this eminent plane where cross channels, and there's no hierarchical arrangement. Because Lane, you have to remember, in the Wired throws off this hierarchical arrangement of the creator of the protocol and so forth, and the God within the Wired. She throws all of this off at the end to create something, to forego belief in her for ultimately, the freedom of humanity or whatever at the very end. So it's very interesting how they do flip that sort of Cartesian story of that's been present in Western metaphysics up until this day, for something, that is very like, cyber shamanic and Gnostic and very new age wooey. But it's very interesting how an anime can do this, how like the embodiment of Lane as a sort of unwilling savior is quite interesting. How Lane starts off again like a divine entity within the parameters of the Wired, but then becomes something more. So, I'm just rambling right now. So, look up some more quotes.
You're definitely got a point there that this definitely takes an interesting role of Gnostic dualism onto it. the lights and things like that, where we see it all the time, where she's staring at literally just telephone wires and electrical wires that we would see along power lines
Yeah.
and things like that. But even the lighting, when she steps out of her house to walk around, and the shadows have that sort of like red, I mean, they're black shadows, but they've got this like red blood cell look to them. And, just sort of like, well, the shadow, of course, of all things created is what I view it as something biological in the show. Everything that is in order to keep yourself maintained into the wired, it's only for the purpose of maintaining your body until you can
Yeah.
transcend it and exist there. I mean, that's how it all starts off. I mean, the show really does kick off its series of events with a girl who kind of caught wind of how this all works and decides to go out on her own terms, and says that she still exists within this wired system, which I've transcended my physical form. I can exist in this digital heavenly realm, that once all things are connected at all times, then reality is then subsumed not by our physical senses, but by our memories and what we believe in to be in existence. And of course,
Yeah.
Lane plays into that with the idea of toying with memory, right? But I it's interesting to examine. I mean, right? That's why we're here. But I find it to be this really weird flip on the head of, well, really the idea of transcendence or godhood, it can now be found to you through this technological device that you will become a whole part of.
Mm-hmm.
And her father's warning, or the dad's warning, which is always interesting because of how the show kind of starts pulling the truth out near the end. Um, he's very mindful to like, look, it's fun. And this is the guy that's got like 5 giant CRT monitors in his office and a printer and
Yeah.
a fax machine and
Yeah.
everything, sort of like what your really cool accountant uncle probably had circa 2002. But, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
he's making the distinct warning, like, if you push this too far, even you were going to lose that divide between, um, the senses and this and what is considered to be this higher realm, which has a very sort of a sort of this traditional contradictory to Christianity viewpoint of things, where like you have to focus on the senses. We can shed the world, of course, by dispelling of our passions and controlling them and following Christ and
Mm-hmm.
his man in a manner as we can as imperfect beings, which are we're cursed with that sort of sin. But for them, it's like, no, you can shed all of this, and if you focus solely on the teachings of these of how the protocol works, learn its intricacies, then you too can become a transcendent divine being.
Yeah.
You can be like Adamus. You can be like this light in this realm of light and wires and
Like
thoughts and
Psyche and
feelings.
Daedalus and
Yeah, right.
yeah.
But just sort of like God is a realm of light, God is a realm of wires, and you
Yeah.
can become a transcendent higher being that is not just human. You can truly be a creator yourself and create your own world and and attain the throne and become God
Yeah.
yourself, which Lane inevitably takes that seat in and battles with the real consequences of what that would mean to be believed in or to exist at all, which I think is one of the more interesting sort of questions that we as humans can't get to answer. We can explore it in fiction. There's that sort of popular concept that gets thrown out there, a lot of like new age ideas of like God's final wish or God's last wish, where like the creation of humanity and the creation of the world was sort of God's last wish to find another being that had the capability to communicate and create and be like him in a very
Yeah.
similar fashion and manner. And Lane kind of plays into that sort of concept rather well, like, oh, another person that has attained this godly attitude that can shape reality however she wishes. But that comes, of course, with its own duality, right? The Lane of the real world is nothing like the Lane of the wired.
She's a
And
sad
so
little girl. Yeah.
yeah, she's a
Yeah.
sad little girl who's an introvert who doesn't belong really anywhere. She doesn't get along with kids her age. But in The Wired, she can
She's a
be.
god. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I mean, but she's a
Goddess.
cruel god, right? Well, like whether
Yeah.
she's laughing and spreading rumors and telling people about how Alice likes to DJ her own party, thinking about the teacher, or playing onto these games and getting people to off themselves. Uh, and this is a totally different tangent, but I really liked where I don't remember which
Go
episode it
ahead.
is, but the one where the kid is being chased by, of course, like this little Alma looking ring like little girl character demon. And the way that he defeats her is not by engaging in the real, but engaging in the digital. where he like does the VR version of like trying to reload a handgun and like
Yeah.
basically caps
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
Although that has real world consequences as well. Because
I'm bleeding, but I thought it wasn't real. Your mind
yeah.
makes it real. Yeah.
And he mag dumps her, and then all of a sudden, like, it comes daylight, and the
dumps me.
laundry falls over, and one falls over a corpse, and he's like, I had nothing to do with this. I didn't think
Yeah.
it was real.
And then she redacts all of the nights too, even the mother who plays
Yeah.
video games with their kid. That was sad though. That the a mom playing video games with their kid, you know.
It's a replay of the sacrifice, I think, as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, even the Knights little logo that we see, which is an obscure playoff of like Harvard's like tech scene from the
that
like,
has
the 90s.
Masonic. Yeah.
It has some Masonic Gnostic imagery too, and you're just like, you know, like
interesting. Yeah.
this guy really knew what he was talking about when he was writing up this show.
Yeah, and it also talks about like Project Xanadu, and like as I've mentioned before, this is the wideness cell theory, which I think, like, well, not to everyone knows my opinion on the thinker varieties, but I do think that it is an interesting idea to say that when you do study Hegel and German idealism and Fichte, which I mean, I have no time to read for Fichte, but Hegel, of course, I have much more of a sympathetic take on Hegel in recent years. That when you do look at what intelligence agencies and what really started in the 70s with things like Project Xanadu to sort of like codify all of human knowledge into one source, that really is sort of like you could start to see what the German idealists were getting at in a way. Like a lot of psychedelic stuff, like there's a book by I believe he's dead now. He sunsetted or something, or he had cancer. He wrote that book's what's it called, Cyberdelica or Cyberdelia, where it talks about the psychedelic experience through the lens of something like Husserl, which, as a phenomenologist, Husserl is still in debt to like Kant and Hegel. Ask Tyler Hamilton. He's our resident Husserl scholar. I'm much more of a Heideggerian, but no, it is funny. You can start to see these sort of inklings of it with the codification of knowledge that is easily accessible around the globe at any given time. How that, in a way, you can say that the global brain ideal is something, when Hegel talks about totality, for instance, that totality doesn't end. This is one thing people get wrong about Hegel. There is no like crescendo of absolute spirit. Like people debate in Hegel studies if there is like an eschatology to Hegel, the way there is in Christianity. But Hegel was still, at the end of the day, a German Christian. So he said, the eschatology business, that's up to faith. It's not, Hegel had a very complex relationship to the church. But I do think that when it comes to Lain, what does make Lain distinct is the engagement in like teen cyberdelic, cyberpunk type of stuff that, first of all, is sort of lost to us, especially the Zoomers. Like they're no longer these, hip, sexy, going against the evil, man in the digital world. Like it seems that cyberpunk is sort of like a dead genre now for obvious reasons. But I would think that Lain is different because, unlike a lot of other productions and media that deals with transhumanism, it's not like the schlocky, like, oh, I'm gonna fight the cyber god. Like it engages these philosophic questions that is very, very interesting. And the fact that the sort of the digital overlays and the editing and Lain going into these like cyber dream sequences that are very abstract and very colorful, like it really is an avant-garde piece of media. It truly is. Like it even the main plot has an ambiguity to it because it recognizes that the digital can mimic something like a metaphysical plane. And so, for example, there's this quote where he talks about how the wired is sort of like the idea of the wire is much older than us and how it permeates into the real and how it's not a doubling of the real, rather it's a full expression of it, which I think is probably something that continental theory, like these orientated ontology people, they talk about how it's not like this Cartesian or this like metaphysical doubling of the real, but rather the real has these eminent planes, right? It's rhizomatic. It's here already. It's not that it's like it's not like this hierarchical Platonic thing. This is why Deleuze, for instance, is basically anti-Platonic in a lot of ways, because Deleuze takes that Platonic and the Platonic equation and inverts it, right? It's now everything is already there. It's no longer the forms. It's not even Aristotle, right? Where Aristotle, it's like the forms and the particulars. No, it's like everything is already present, and so the digital really in a way people equate the digital with a Platonism, but really it's kind of an anti-Platonism in a way, because it gives expression to the immediate eminent plane, that rhizomatic view rather than a Platonic view, in a way, if that really makes sense, or I'm just being a theory cell right now. But like it's in a way, like the digital world is not merely Platonism. It's almost an anti-Platonics in a way, because there's no hiddenness to the form of it. Even the algorithm, you can sort of, even though you're not the one programming the algorithms, you can sort of see its manifestations. You can sort of feel its energies. Like on YouTube, for instance, like why certain content is predicated above other things, and why, like, it is kind of like you can only feel the energies of it, not the essence of the algorithm. So it's like,
Well, right.
oh man,
You can only
yeah.
feel the algorithm's uncreated light if you are lucky and your video gets above like 50,000 views or whatever,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like even our friend Oren McIntyre, like he was just like, why did this video about the death of the managerial elite get over 100,000 views when I'd never topped that number on a regular basis?
Yeah.
It's like, well, you have been visited by this transfiguration of the algorithm or something. Who knows? But I mean, that's the other thing too. And like you mentioned, Western cyberpunk kind of falls into the same bits that like normie progressivism falls into, where it becomes like a Christian heresy, where that again, it's sort of that old Buggian thing. Like, well, if you're a Christian, if you're an atheist and you were once a Christian, you're a Christian atheist. If you're a Muslim atheist, you're a Muslim atheist. Like those are the things that you were socialized with. That's your worldview, which again, why in Lane, the children are the primary focus rather than the adults.
Yeah.
But to me, what it shows, like, well, modern cyberpunk, right? Like, we're supposed to focus on the dystopic forms of control, usually by monopolies or the technological slavery that we have forced ourselves into. But like the reason why there's in terms of like in a video game, right? Like, I hate using this word, but the ludonarrative dissidence of cyberpunk games and things like that is that the aesthetic looks really fucking cool. Versus the fact like, oh yeah, I'm in this like society that has been totally transmogrified to be like the worst thing ever, where I'm surviving on various forms of implants that I have to upgrade myself along, keeping the biology alive with some slop that you can find down the way. And we even see that now in the discourse about what I guess you could call a cyberpunk dystopia, whether that's in Sweden, that company that's putting microchips inside of their hands to track their employees, or where even a certain 41% lobby group gets so excited about, I've just turned my part of my forearm into a new organ. Isn't that so heckin' wholesome or whatever? And it's just like, so we get obsessed with sort of the sacramentality of the body and the blood of ourselves, whether that's through hormones and the like. Whereas Lane is just like, no, screw this body shit. We're going to totally transcend ourselves into a new digital space, this heavenly realm, create a heaven site, very literally.
Create a heaven site. There you go. That's a good one.
Is, manifested based upon where everyone's connected to it. Everyone. And it's also funny because this is made in the late 90s, early 2000s, right? Because did you check your email? It's not your phone call. It's not it's your email above all else. And that's another interesting thing that I picked up on. But yeah, like this flips the traditional Western cyberpunk, cyber dystopia model on its head. And it takes a lot of continental philosophy and Gnostic teachings and sort of flips it in a way that I think you could really only get from, say, the East, looking at sort of Western concepts in the world. In the same way that, like, if you were to play Elden Ring, you get a really interesting interpretation of Trinitarian, like the Trinity in Christianity.
Really? Is that what Elden Ring's about?
Well, there's a little bit of it in there. It's not entirely it, but I mean, it's a really foreign. I mean, I can't imagine being a missionary trying to explain the consubstantial Trinity to to the East. Like, yeah, one God, but they're three distinct persons, and then you have to,
Yeah, they don't
and then
have that
depending on who
same
you
in
talk to,
Buddhism.
you
They
have to
don't.
talk about where who does the Holy Spirit proceed from. But I mean, that's
Yeah,
it's just these are the things that I find interesting when
yeah.
encountering other cultures and religions. Like I'm going to be in a couple of, I think either not this weekend but the next. I'm going to be basket weaving with a friend of mine in the area, but
Nice.
he's a devout traditionalist Hindu. And so getting to hear his perspective on his own faith and his own, viewpoint in theology is always interesting to me because it makes you
Is he a
wonder, like, well,
Shankarite or does he follow Vedanta or?
I think the latter.
Yeah,
But again, more
that's what it
conversation
is.
for me to
Yeah.
have over dinner.
Oh,
Um,
Shankara Vedanta. Yeah,
but yeah, no, it's just it's always
yeah.
interesting to see how the East takes Western theology or concepts and puts them in ways that you only really get to experience by really niche CCRU accelerationist types out there.
Exactly. It
Because
really is the only way they could understand it, like not the
yeah,
only way, but they're to engage with it. Like I know that's why Heidegger became very popular in Japan. Um, but we have oh man, we have Coach Red Pill. We have Gonzalo Lira in the chat. He wants to get on. So I don't know. Yeah, let me send link. But I don't know. Prude. I think we'll lap out Lane a little bit. Then I guess. Yeah. So, but at the end of Lane. So the end of Lane. So she basically destroys her own godhood to like you know to give people like what would you say to give people the choice of like the wired to like engage as like freely or yeah the ending is kind of ambiguous to me but
I
yeah
partially ambiguous because Alice in this Lane, well, Lane renounces herself as this position of godliness,
yeah yeah
and she instantly puts herself in this position where I can remove myself from the world, and we get to experience, I think, one of the coolest weird theological questions. Like, well, what does God feel when people don't know he exists? Or because the church fathers of the early church will tell us, right, that God yearns to be yearned. I mean, I think Saint
yeah
Maximus the Confessor is a really good example of how he talks about the mystical marriage. But God yearns to be yearned, God wants to be wanted, and he wants you to want him. And so Lane at the end kind of gets to experience this question of like, well, what does God feel like when either A, people choose to turn their backs to him, or they're just not aware that he exists and that he wants to be wanted. And so, and then like Lane goes through this like truly existential crisis where she's out in the wired, but no one knows who she is anymore. No one knows that she exists. She's removed herself from the memories and consciousness of everyone on Earth.
yeah
Um, and so she's crying, and she's just like, well, she no longer exists in any manifested but tangible sensory reality, not just digitally speaking. I mean, that she could be found. And we kind of get a glimpse of that at the very end where Alice, like, oh, you look like someone I once knew. And it kind of has an ambiguous ending to it. But
yeah
it really does pose the question of like, well, could you, if you were to truly remove yourself today in 2022, if you could remove yourself in all forms, facets online, would anyone ever know that you existed? You get to sort of pose in a digital sense. If a tree fell in the forest and no one heard it, did it fall? And that sort of becomes the ultimate question about how we perceive reality. Is just, well, if it's only sensory, then our limited understand, like our understanding of the world's really limited. But at the
mhm.
same time, it also plays on what I mean, that even the gospels sort of touch on, like, blessed is he who did not see but still believes. And that's the real sort of interesting question at the end of Lane. Is like, well, will she be found again? Will
Mhm.
she come ascendant once more, or will someone just discover them even if they were completely removed? Because it does sort of have that deja vu sort of ending, where like, oh, you remind me of someone I knew, but I guess not. But perhaps, you never know, we'll meet again. And I think that there's just a lot of really cool stuff. And I'm probably going to watch it again just so I
Oh
can
yeah
maybe do my own review or something. Because I really enjoyed this. I'm not an anime guy. I've seen maybe.
oh you still there well we'll wait for him a little bit you guys still hear me though Oh boy. Uh, oh boy. I don't know what happened. Can you guys still hear me? Oh man. We'll get to super chats after. Let me contact him. But yeah, the last scene was interesting because when it comes to that sacrifice, uh, when it comes to like the end of Lane, it's very interesting. Is he freezing up for you guys too? Um, Weeb's down. Oh no, yeah. Oh boy, he left. But we'll see what happens. But I have to do super chats, and I think what I was gonna say is like the social isolation of Lane is also quite interesting. How I think that's why a certain subset of people online uh like Lane so much, because it is like you can become your own reality. But anyways, before I get to super chats, I did send the link to Gonzalo Lira. So he is here right now. So yeah, I think Prude is probably his internet. Where he lives in rural Texas, it's like, yeah, his internet cuts out once in a while. So oh, he is back. Yeah, it's a stream.
Yeah,
And
power just went out. That was really
wait,
weird.
yeah, weird. No, Gonzalo Lira was here too, but I don't know where he went.
Oh. Believe in Prude to bring him back. No, I'm very much here. Sorry about that. My lights just flashed in and out, and then power was down for a minute, but we're back.
So finish up your point, then maybe we'll do super chats. I'll bring Gonzalo on. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, where did I leave off? I don't know where it cut me at.
About like the loneliness of Lane or the sacrifice.
Oh well, yeah. So I mean, she's lonely.
Yeah.
And
I said that's why a certain subsection of certain people that had any issues really love Lane, because it really, the theme of like creating your own reality is yeah.
Well, yeah. So really, my only thought there on this issue is just that I think when the loneliness factor, right? I think I can see why certain subsets of people or crowds would want to be into it or interested, which is because, oh well, I only exist online as the self because, you know, all those tweets about when the Zoom cameras turn on and they can't stand looking at their own physical selves on the screen or in the mirror.
Yeah.
Like, well, why else would I want to exist digitally? So the desire to escape is constantly there. But at the end of the day, right, we all have to log off. We all have to turn off our phones, and we all have to see our reflection of ourselves in the screen. So that's the case that it has to be. But those are my thoughts there.
And again, one of the best keynotes of all time. But we do have let me, you know what? Yeah, why do I gotta? Let's face if everyone's gonna. Gonzalo, hello, my friend. You there? Oh, maybe he's arranging. But well, then we'll go to super chats. But
sounds good.
Oh man, I think. But go lift. Yeah, exactly. Seth, go lift weights. But so the loneliness of Lane is quite interesting. What? Are you there, my friend?
Hey, do you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, great. Because before I didn't hear anything, and I apparently couldn't be heard. So how's it going? Good to see you again.
Man. Yeah, good to see you again. How have things been in Kharkov? You've been holding in there. I've been watching your videos recently, so.
Yeah, the bombing has gotten worse in Kharkov. Like in early September, they knocked out the lights for like 8 hours, and then again, I think a few weeks after that. But this week they've knocked them out like 3 days. Once was just only for like 3 hours. Then on, I want to say Monday, it was 8 hours, and today it was for like just shy of an hour. But yeah, it's pretty cool. It's really fucking wild, man.
Yeah.
What about yourself? How are things going? You were talking about all kinds of deep stuff, you know?
Oh yeah, we watched this anime called Lane.
Okay.
So yeah, so it's like this woman becomes this high school girl becomes a goddess in the internet, more or less. So
okay.
Yeah. A lot of crazy Nick Land stuff, but yeah.
And what was the upshot? Do we
The
want to
upshot-
be uploaded into a computer or not?
No, I guess Lane rejects that at the end because she realizes how destructive it is if like the internet blends into the real world, but yet I don't know, there's sort of a fatalism to it because in a way, like what's happening right now. Like yeah, so
No, all of the big tech companies are pushing for the metaverse or something analogous to it. I mean, they are really investing a whole boatload of money. They want to turn the whole
yeah.
world into Ready Player One. It's kind of pathetic.
Yeah, but they're losing their shirt though because people like rejected this like ghastly metaverse crap. But I don't know, maybe like they'll force us into it. That was
I mean,
always the dream.
it says a lot though, Gio, when like Second Life from 10, 15 years ago had a much better realistic sort of what's the word I'm looking for?
Interface.
Well, not just interface, but it had a realer sense of what the world looked like. It had it was more grounded in reality versus this weird floating arms and heads body type deal of what Zuckerberg is trying to do with the metaverse.
Yeah.
Hey, by the way, hi, Prudentialist. I don't think that you and I have ever interacted before. Have we?
I think we interacted that one time when you came on with
Default.
Catherine D. But that was
Oh,
about it.
right. Yeah. How's it going?
I'm well. How are you?
Oh, pretty good, actually. Yeah, you can't complain. I'm smoking too much. That's the only downside of this period.
Well, it's one way to enjoy life, I guess. It's one of our many vices.
Are you gonna talk about the? Yeah, go ahead, Coach. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say that I was like, hoping to shoot some heroin, but the dealers all left the city, so shit out of luck.
Well, you gotta
Can
work
we
with what
say
you
that
have.
on YouTube?
Yeah. I like heroin, and nobody around. Oh, shit. Okay, Marlboro's red, I suppose. But I'm sorry. What?
No,
go ahead.
You're writing your book. Are you gonna write about the internet in your book, your experiences, or?
Oh no! I'm writing something completely different. It's actually right up your alley, but I don't think that most people are gonna like it. It's about ethics. And, so I've been like fooling around on that, and it's coming along very well.
That's cool.
It's actually it's coming along extremely well because like there's nothing to do here, okay? And I made up my mind that I wasn't going to leave the city. I'm going to stay here until the end of the conflict, whensoever this conflict ends, And I just want to see how it ends. But because of that, while I wait for it to end, there's nothing to do. So I have like huge chunks of time during the day. And I'm fortunate enough that I'm good for money. And so I just write. I'm writing about, like on average, about 1,500 words a day. But I only work Monday through Friday. Like I deliberately take the weekends off because I don't want to burn out, And so, weekly, I'm averaging 7,000 words a week. And I'm on pace right now. I've got, I just crossed the 150,000 word mark, and which is roughly halfway through. But of the 150,000 that I have, I think maybe 20% will be, shaved off in the editing process. So I've got about, I would say about 120,000 words, which is about 300 pages, I suppose. And I think the final thing is going to be like, about 300,000 words. That's what it's looking like at this point. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah.
That's good. But you've been streaming a lot though lately. Like I watched, I'm watching a few of them, but the recent one about the pullout from Hadiths with Byron Balearic. Was it with Byron Balearic? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of blackpilling lately in the dissident scene in the West about like, oh, they can't do it. It's over. It's over. So
they don't understand modern warfare at all. They think that it's like a
video game,
like pro football, right?
Oh yeah.
Where you have to capture territory. Right? Or like the game of Risk. You capture territory. But territory doesn't mean shit. The whole point of warfare is to annihilate your opposing army. And if you obsess about land, you'll throw away soldiers that you could have used in a better situation. That's what the Russians did by pulling out of Kherson. They had 20,000 men there. and the Zelensky regime had been, doing these like probing attacks, sometimes reconnaissance in force, kind of like sometimes it looked like it was going to be an offensive, but it was just a probe, right? And they were consistently losing. I mean, really just getting their asses handed to them. And then the Russians realized, hey, there's this dam further upriver that they can blow up, and that would cut off these 20,000 Russian troops on the north shore of the river.
Yeah.
And so they made the very rational decision that, instead of trying to defend fucking cow country, because that's what it is, they evacuated the city and pulled out all their troops. And, the Ukrainians walked into empty terrain, although they haven't walked in force, because they know that that whole region is pre-sighted with artillery. And so, see, when they walked into the Kherson region, which the Russians had also abandoned, they walked in. I mean, they just flooded in, and they got the shit kicked out of them. They got hammered.
Yeah, there was massive
artillery.
casualties.
Yeah. And so this time around, they're a little bit smarter and not doing that very, very stupid move. And so, so that area is. I mean, they have like reconnaissance teams going into Kherson and taking a picture of themselves with the flag in downtown Kherson, but they're not moving in force because they're scared. They already, I mean, once bitten, twice shy, the saying. And but in the West, they're claiming that this is like a great victory, and any day now, the Zelensky regime is going to be mounting on.
That they're going to go through
Melitopol,
and they're gonna take Crimea back. Yeah.
Oh no, they're going to take Moscow at this rate.
Moscow.
This is very foolish,
But I just think that it's too early to tell. I think that the Russians are in it for a long haul. But anyways, we should get to super chats. But I mean, Prude, what do you have thoughts? I mean, you were following a little bit of the news on the Kherson pullout. Do you think it's that significant? Because I think they still control about 60% of the region, just not the main city that's beyond the Dnieper. But yeah.
Well, look, they've declared it Russian territory. They're going to take it back eventually. Yeah. But the Russians, see, Clausewitz wrote that you don't fight the territory, you fight the opposing army. So fuck the territory, right? And the Russians have historically been more than happy to give up territory if they can conserve their forces and attack at a later date. So that's what's going on. But in the West, people get map obsessed, and they look at the map and they're moving here and there, and they actually think it means something. What matters is the daily casualties. And see, like the other day, like the New York Times was going all out, freaking out, saying, or not freaking out, cheerleading, saying that the Russians had lost 300 soldiers, right? That had been 300 casualties. They didn't say wounded or killed in action. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, that it was 120 KIA and 180 wounded, incapacitated, right? Well, that was like this great victory. But the thing is, see, the Russians are inflicting that on a daily basis, and not just on the whole front, on like the different fronts, okay? There have been days when they've lost, killed outright, over 1,000 men in a single day. So, if this is a war of attrition, and the Russians are really good at wars of attrition. And so, yeah. I'm sorry, Prudentialist. I cut you off.
No, you're perfectly fine in this regard. Just my position on following it. I mean, I sort of have to rely on others. I'm not there like you are. So I try my best to pay attention to the second order impacts that are going to come around. So things that we see in like the markets, grain stocks, and exports, which is going to take a substantial hit this winter, especially just with what's recently happened with Russia's agreement with shipping out from the Black Sea on grain shipments. So I've been paying more attention really towards the Middle East and North Africa, which has been the larger recipients of these grain exports and shipping. And it's
I understood that most of that was actually going to Europe.
Well, Europe, but primarily the thing that I've been noticing has been that Russia and Ukraine constitute 40% of like the entire UN World Food Program supply, which donates most of it towards countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Syria, South Africa, Somalia, Ethiopia, and Egypt, which is really depressing once Egypt used to be the breadbasket of Rome. But these are the things that I think is going to have some really big impacts, not this winter, but come spring when people are trying to harvest and such. So
Yeah.
those are the things that I've been looking at. And it's going to be really consequential when we see domestic riots and government strain to maintain control, similar to what we've seen in Lebanon after the grain silo explosion, which really has no answer since 2020. So I think we're going to see a lot more unrest in this area, but I think only time will tell once the Russians regroup and coordinate onward.
But also the funding, though.
I'm sorry. What do you think of the European situation in terms of energy and food for this winter?
Well, I think that a lot of these European governments are preparing to deal with outages and such. I mean, the BBC has already had text warning people about the lack of energy. The German government's got PSAs and infographics about the differences between blackouts and brownouts. I'm sure that they're very happy, however, to watch as other nations like India and China take Russian oil and natural gas and sell it back to them at a higher price, while the Americans ship LNG over on cargo ports. So it's going to be a difficult winter, I would say, nonetheless, for a lot of European nations, especially in the West.
Yeah. I'm actually wondering how the hell they're going to ship natural gas from those other markets in India and China to Europe, because I don't see actually a viable way for them to ship it. There are no pipelines in that direction, or perhaps there are, but I'm unclear about it. Now the Europeans, man, they shot themselves in the foot. Worse than that, they kind of like chopped off one of their own limbs. I don't quite understand their whole rationale. Do you guys think it's like this Malthusian streak that they want to just deindustrialize and shrink the population for some bizarre ideological reasons?
I question that. I know the BAP says that it doesn't make sense when they're giving grain subsidies to Africa, but I think that they do want to exert control over all of Europe as a vassal state. But that's obvious, the GAE. But I don't know. There could be something like that. Like, I know that the propaganda is to have less dependence on the supply of goods. But anyways, we have to get to super chats because we have to stay on topic. So
Sure.
But thank you, Gonzalo, for stopping by. If you wanted to, do you want to just pop in, or I don't know.
Yeah, well, I'd love to hear the super chats. Actually, I'm curious.
Yeah, all right. But it's about Lane, though. It's about Lane. So let me roll up here.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, then I'll bow out. Okay. Take it easy, man.
All right. Well,
Great
thank you
seeing
for coming.
both.
Thank you for stopping by.
Take care.
We'll talk.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Ciao. All right. Let's go to super chats. Well, Charlemagne was in the chat too.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. Shit. Here they are. Here they are. I'm just scrolling up so I could put them on the screen. So, all right, getting back to Lane. I think here we go. Okay. So this first one is by Cringe Walker, our good friend Cringe Walker. Congrats to you for interviewing Tim Pool. Oh,
Now, well,
the Tim Pool jokes. I knew Cringe Walker was going to say that.
Well, we've been giving him enough shit in Jay Burden's Telegram chat today. I think it's only fair he gets his licks in.
Yeah, it's true. He gets his licks in. Oh man. For $5, Son of Haster for the Lovecraft stream. Keep up the good work, lads. Started reading ZHP Lovecraft for the first time recently. Wild stuff. Oh, thank you, Son of Haster. Maybe we get ZHP on the show one day.
We should. I'm really upset that he got kicked off WordPress, but I mean,
I know.
He's been uploading all of the stories to Substack, so it's like a rush of literary nostalgia every time I get an inbox in my email saying that it's a story, that I haven't read in forever. So support him on Substack if you can. Yeah, he recently uploaded, but it's very hard to upload all the sprawling links to Substack like he did with WordPress. But yeah, I've only known two people to get nuked off of WordPress, him and Jay Dyer. That's really weird. But thank you for $5, TR. I believe it's a sticker. I have to look up for it. So thank you, TR. I love the avatar of the cat playing a flute. I love that one. And $6 by an official weeb, Neon Peon. Thank you.
For $6.99, Lain is a beautiful refutation of the Cartesian notion of some true self that finds its truest expression on the internet. Good stream, by the way. Thank you, Neon Peon. Any thoughts?
A very good take.
Yeah, very good take. And yeah, we were talking a bit about that. So, and for our good regular listener, for $7.99, Scoos the Goose. Let's all love Lain. Yes, Lall. Thank you, Lain taking your L's. And for another $5, TR. Gio is a based weeb convert. Thank you. Yes, exactly, Karos. For $5 by TR. Much truth to the reactionary Hallmark movie thing. Those in cooking shows are all my LeBase Stradcath wife watches. From November through January. Yeah, my mother, like, she DVRs all of the Hallmark, the new ones.
Yeah. I mean, once Hallmark kicks off to, every day is a Christmas movie, like all day, every hour on the hour. That's the only thing that my aunt has on the television. Like, she could be in the kitchen in the other room, but that television's on full blast with every Hallmark movie coming in, about Christmas and things like that. And, it's kind of funny because once you do it, you kind of get to see like their usual cast of characters, like their main actors for whoever's going to play the loveless romantic and things like that. So you're just like, okay, I now know every single person that starred in a Hallmark movie. But yeah, it always ends up like that. Some separated couple finds love again, or some girl boss, goes back to the sticks and finds love with some, 7 out of 10 Chad that does some weird artisanal sort of job, but leaves the city, leaves the girl boss job behind, or leaves the shitty lawyer boyfriend behind. It's really the most reactionary Kino we've got out there.
Yeah, but notice how they're all Gen Xers though. That's weird.
Well, I think that's the thing is that we talk.
They're no millennials.
Well, that's why they're getting all gay now. But right, that's why Hallmark's getting your token BIPOC, Hallmark Christmas romance, or two gay men or whatever. And that's why certain actors and actresses are leaving. But yeah, I mean, Hallmark is our bastion of reactionary Kino for suburban white moms.
Yeah, but I think it goes along with the whole millennial erasure thing about they're always like aging Gen Xers, or they're like boomers, or they're like now Zoomer. There's Zoomers in Hallmark movies now.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So, but yeah, well, and they're eventually going to have the aging millennial woman girl boss. So,
or the spinster aunt on Instagram. Who knows?
Yeah, but they always have like their spouse always died, and they're like a single parent, or like highest percentage of single fathers on Hallmark movies. So
yeah, a lot of widowers on Hallmark.
Yeah, I know, but it's like they got a kayfabe like divorce and all of that, which is really funny. This is by Actual Physical Kelp, $5. Kaiba is the other transhumanist anime that T people love. Gio, have you watched? I have not watched Kaiba, but maybe I will. Maybe we could. Well, thank you for the recommendation. I know people were talking about other animes that are pretty good in the chat. So
yeah, a certain subset of people love.
Yeah. Again, Spasticus Autisticus. Wow, Gio's now streaming with Tim Pool. Very cool. Wow, that's a good one. Tim Pool.
We just need to get a studio like Tim Pool. Maybe that can be the Based World Creator House. Is that every right wing, Twitter personality has a studio like Tim Pool's.
Yeah, exactly. We need to make this happen. The Theo Bucks can make this happen. The Theo Bucks will make this happen. So final super chats. Let's go. I'm going through. Here we go. For $2, Psychedelics, Joe Rogan, and Tim Pool on this panel. Thank you. If I shave my head, would I look like Joe Rogan? A little bit, maybe.
Maybe, who knows? But we still both have a full head of hair, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, someone's accused us of Norwooding in the chat.
Oh well, you motherfuckers! I got a full head of hair.
Like, there you go.
Take that Norwood pill and shove it up your.
Shut up your way. Do like the Fred Durst, like that. Oh man, let's see if we have any more super chats. Cringe Walker for $5. Europe won't starve or freeze because the U.S. is willing to loot their own oil reserves over it. But next year, when they run out, it will be interesting. Yeah, I think 2020 winter. It won't be this winter. it'll be winter 2023, which will probably be the deciding factor if the war continues into the winter next year. That's my opinion, but I don't know, Prude, if you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, we've been draining the strategic oil reserve for, a little bit of political reasons. I mean, it's the lowest it's ever been since 1974. Like, I mean, we're getting a lot of, I know a lot of people like to say, oh, we're getting 1970s vibes. I don't think that they're comparable, but we are going to see some really interesting things play out if we do actually hit that diesel shortage.
Yeah. We really need a reactionary Kino master list or archive. Sympathetic media is very powerful. Well, there's ChadNet.
Well, I think our friend Raisin should try and get a hold of the Mystery Grove movie list.
Yeah. That could go up on ChadNet too.
Yeah.
ChadNet has all the archive of Hadiths. I believe they have ChadNet has a lot of BAP tweets from his old account that got nuked. And so this is for $2 by Marco. It's 5.8. You boys need to get Gio's paisan in this. Which paisan? You referring to? I have many paisans. You referring to? Who can I think? Maybe Dave Martell or Astro, or Breast Milk and Joy. Breast Milk and Joy. I think he does podcasts. I don't know.
I don't know, but I know Astral and Martell are always great guests.
Yeah. I know that Astro, he wants to like walk away a little bit from the Twitter scene, but I mean, maybe Dave Martell. I went on his podcast actually. I don't know when it's coming out. I have to ask him. It's reactionary, but not Kino. Sadly, Donald Trump game. Yeah, Harmar.
I love that name. I love that name. That's
Donald Trump, and it's got the Iroquois. I forget which anime character that it's called. I remember Donald Trump Gaming said last time, but get Borzy on. Yeah, maybe we get Borzy on. Is that Josh Neal? I'm Gio's top paisan. We can get Josh Neal on. There you go. Yeah, one of my best content-minded episodes with Josh Neal. So, but yeah, so that's enough for the super chats. Unless you people have some last minute. Haruai, is that how you say it? Haruai? Yeah. I'm getting better at the anime names.
One of these days, Gio, you're gonna have one of those edits of you where it's just constantly doing anime names.
BTR, I did the Naya thing too for super chat. So
I remember.
Naya, how the heck? That's how you say it. How the heck? Oh, you meant Furious Pertnix. Yeah, we got to do that final part of Ben-Hur.
Ben-Hur, yeah,
Furious,
we do.
Yeah.
You had one more, I think, that just came in.
Oh wow. Did I do that by Marcus?
You did. Never mind. Okay. We're
yeah. Tim Pool's clickbait game is genius. Tim Pool has a clickbait game?
He has a clickbait game? I did not know.
Yeah. Choose weep card revoked. All right. So this has been a good episode of Serial Experiments Lain. Like I say, it's really one of the greatest animes I've ever seen in my life. And I haven't seen many animes, so don't take my word for it. But it truly is a masterpiece. You know, it's pronounced like a pronoun, hi or hey. Hi. Okay, that's enough of that. There was that one clip that went viral on YouTube where this like stuffy old guy with glasses, he like, you know, in PBS how they have the ads, like in between like the call out, like the call in things. He's like, "Wow, amazing! Serial Experiments Lain. We finally got it from the Japanese distributor. Finally, for the first time ever in the West." It was like on PBS. That's how important this anime is. This is how cultural it is. So hashtag canceled. So this has been Weeb Appreciation. Final shilling before we go. Before this stream, you had a fishing video.
Yeah, I was talking about just the power of mythology, socialization, and just how how these mind viruses are just so strong, both on ourselves, but also towards our ideological opposites, and why we really do need to reclaim, parental and community responsibility. Because just like we noticed with Lain, it's not enough for just the dad to say, "Hey, don't confuse it with, reality." You actually have to go a little further than that. Yeah.
And also, the fact that like Lain's family was basically like they were just there as plants to like convince Lain that she was real. It's
Yeah,
very.
you were
it was
real,
very
Lane. I was never really your father. You know.
interesting.
I mean, it kind of stuck out when it's like the mom is just this like emotionless dullard that's just like,
Yeah.
well, at least I can try and like make out with this man, you know, like nothing more.
Yeah. Nothing more. Oh, what'd you say, Prue?
Oh, I said nothing more, nothing less. That was it.
Yeah, yeah. And final shilling. I don't know what Content Minded will be next week. But go and watch the Kino Corner episode.
It's
And
very good.
thank you. It's subscribe to my Patreon. And this week on a Prudent Reflections, you did the one on Ethiopia. So what's
Yeah,
this
like
week?
last week was Ethiopia's Tigray War, just to let people know like the greater consequences of it, because Ethiopia, I think, is going to be one of those regions that a lot of global and great powers are going to be interested in. So you guys got to know about that. And then this Saturday, I will be reviewing John J. Mearsheimer's 2018 book, The Great Delusion, Liberalism and International Realities. And then this Friday, on the Old Glory Club, we're going to be reviewing the Trump 2024 announcement with Oren McIntyre, Charlemagne, myself, and Red Hawk. So it'll be really good tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern.
What do you think of that? People were saying he was low energy. But
I think, well, after Fox cut off, everyone was saying low energy. But I mean, it took him about 15-20 minutes, and then he was basically talking about redacting drug dealers. So I'm pretty much all for it. So
now the Bolso is gone, yeah.
That and the National Review basically just made a meme. They said no, and I was like, cool. I guess I'm sucked
New
back
meme.
into the game of playing with this of playing the Trump train again. But so be it. I just my only take on it's going to be like, unless this dude gets back on Twitter, he's going to get screwed over by the media like every other Republican candidate ever.
Yeah. I mean, that's the one thing Martin said, that Trump basically needs to go back on Twitter or else.
Yeah, I mean, Martin's political instincts are almost never wrong,
Yeah.
so I agree with him there.
My thing is that really, like, who else do the Republicans have in terms of a chance at 24? Or else if you could just like declare 24 a mulligan and expect like the 2026 midterms to go your way. I don't know. Like basically this is the one that Trump has to win, in my opinion. Like, I mean, he's going to be too old for. Yeah.
This is sort of the twilight, really, of whatever this MAGA Republicanism is going to be.
Yeah, this is like loser leaves the company match for Trump. You know what I mean? So, but anyways, you'll save it for Old Glory Club. So
yeah.
So this has been great. Thank you a lot, people. Next week on Prude's channel, we'll discuss about what to do. We always have something great for you. So God bless and goodbye.
Take care, gents.
Yeah.